Arrival at Galactic Academy. Jake Thompson stood at the entrance of the Galactic Academy, a sprawling complex unlike anything he had ever seen. The Academy was a massive, glimmering structure floating above an alien planet, with luminous blue walls that shimmered in the light of the distant sun. Towering spires rose into the atmosphere, twisting and branching off like a labyrinth of technology and organic life blended together. It was a school that catered to every sentient species in the galaxy, a melting pot of knowledge, culture, and diversity. But Jake, a human, was about to become one of its first Earthling students. As he walked through the enormous doors, his eyes widened at the sheer scale of the place. Aliens of all shapes, sizes, and colors filled the halls. Some glided, some floated, and others walked on appendages that seemed too numerous to count. Jake couldn't help but grin. This was going to be one heck of an adventure. At the entrance, waiting to greet him, was Principal Zix9. Zix9's gelatinous body shifted and rippled as he approached, his 3 eye stalks swaying from side to side as if scrutinizing the new arrival. The principal was an old creature by his species standards, and his role at the academy was to maintain peace and order among the diverse population of students. Though seasoned in dealing with alien cultures, Zix9 had never encountered a human before. "Mr. Thompson," the principal began, his voice a strange mixture of gurgling and electronic buzzing, "you are the first human to attend our institution. I must warn you that Galactic Academy houses the most diverse collection of sentient beings in the known universe. Your human tendencies might be disruptive." Jake raised an eyebrow, trying to stifle a grin. "Disruptive? Me? No way, Principal Zix. I'm the most well-behaved guy you'll ever meet," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Zix9's eye stalks quivered in frustration. He wasn't sure if the human was being sarcastic or not. Humans were known for their unpredictable behavior. He gestured toward the doors of the academy with one of his many tentacles. "Just try to blend in, Mr. Thompson. The last thing we need is interspecies conflict on your first day." Jake gave a mock salute. "Aye, aye, Captain. I'll do my best not to accidentally start a galactic war." As Jake strolled down the hallways, aliens of all kinds stared at him. He was used to being the center of attention, but this was different. Some of the students looked at him with curiosity, others with skepticism, and a few with outright suspicion. To them, humans were a mystery, a species that evolved on an isolated planet, largely unnoticed by the wider galaxy until recently. Jake's every move was watched, analyzed, and catalogued by the various eyes, sensors, and otherworldly organs around him. His first class was Interspecies Communication 1001, taught by Professor Clarthar. The professor was a sight to behold, half praying mantis, half disco ball. His body glistened with shifting colors, and his multiple limbs twitched constantly, reflecting the light in mesmerizing patterns. As Jake walked into the classroom, all eyes, whether they belonged to 1, 2, or even 20, turned toward him. "Ah, the new human student," Professor Clarthar clicked, his mandibles moving excitedly. "Please introduce yourself to the class." Jake cleared his throat dramatically, looking around the room at the bizarre collection of aliens. Some had tentacles, others had multiple heads, and a few didn't even seem to have a solid form. Jake smiled. "Greetings, fellow sentients. I'm Jake Thompson, emissary of Earth, destroyer of pizzas, and occasional napper. I come in peace, unless you try to take my coffee. Then all bets are off." Silence followed his introduction. A small, furry creature sitting in the front row slowly raised a tentacle. "Excuse me, but what is coffee? And why would it provoke you to violence?" Jake gasped theatrically. "You don't know about coffee? Oh, you poor, caffeine-deprived souls. Coffee is the nectar of the gods, the elixir of life, the only thing standing between us and complete chaos." The room remained silent, the alien students clearly baffled. Professor Clarthar twitched nervously. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," he interrupted, his antennae vibrating. Perhaps we can discuss Earth beverages another time. Please, take your seat. Jake sat down, still smiling to himself. He was sure of one thing: this was going to be fun. Lunch at the Galactic cafeteria. By the time lunch rolled around, word had spread through the academy about the strange human student. Jake entered the cafeteria to find himself the center of attention once again. The room was packed with aliens of every conceivable type, some sitting at tables, others floating above them, and a few even eating upside down, clinging to the ceiling like bats. The food was equally bizarre, with trays of glowing orbs, slithering tentacles, and unidentifiable liquids being consumed by students of various species. Jake grabbed a tray and sat down at an empty table, but it didn't stay empty for long. Aliens of all shapes and sizes quickly surrounded him, their curiosity overwhelming. "Is it true that humans can regenerate lost limbs?" asked a squid-like creature, its tentacles waving excitedly. Jake snorted, nearly choking on his synthesized protein cube. "Nah, that's just a myth. Though I had an aunt who swore her hair grew back thicker after each cut. Does that count?" A robotic entity with glowing blue eyes tilted its head. "Our databanks indicate that humans are composed of approximately 60% water. How do you prevent yourself from slushing when you move?" Jake grinned. "Simple. We're basically walking water balloons with really good skin." The robot's eyes flickered as it processed the information. A small green alien with large compound eyes raised a spindly arm. "I heard humans have a bizarre mating ritual called dancing. Is this true?" Jake's grin widened mischievously. "Oh, absolutely. In fact, I'll give you a demonstration." He stood up, looked around dramatically, and then proceeded to perform the worst rendition of the Macarena the galaxy had ever seen. The cafeteria fell silent, every eye, sensor, and tentacle focused on the flailing human. For a moment, it seemed like the galaxy itself was holding its breath. Then, from the back of the room, a low rumble began. It started with a gelatinous student whose entire body vibrated as they began to laugh. Soon, the entire cafeteria erupted into a cacophony of alien laughter, clicks, whistles, rumbles, and even some sounds Jake was pretty sure shouldn't be physically possible. He sat back down, feeling rather pleased with himself. But not everyone was amused. Across the room, a group of tough-looking aliens, massive bipedal creatures that resembled rhinoceroses, glared at Jake. Their leader, a particularly large one with jagged horns, cracked his knuckles menacingly. Jake gulped. "Oh," he muttered to himself, "I think I've offended the local bullies." The encounter with Grogar. The rest of Jake's day passed in a blur of strange and fascinating classes: advanced tentacle coordination, xenobiology, and galactic history. By the time the final bell rang, which was actually more of a psychic pulse that made everyone's brains itch, Jake was both exhausted and exhilarated. As he walked toward the exit, however, his path was blocked by the group of rhino-like aliens he had noticed earlier. Their leader, Grogar, loomed over Jake, his massive form casting a shadow. Well, Grogar rumbled, "if it isn't the funny little human." "Not so funny now, are you?" Jake looked up at the towering alien, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. He had dealt with bullies before, but never one this size. "I don't know," Jake quipped. "I still think I'm pretty hilarious. But I'm always open to constructive criticism. Did you want to workshop some of my material?" Grogar's nostrils flared. "You think you're clever, don't you? Coming here, making a mockery of our customs, acting like you own the place." Jake held up his hands. "Whoa there, big guy. I'm not trying to mock anyone. I'm just trying to fit in my own, weird human way." Grogar growled and reached for Jake with a massive hand. What happened next would go down in Galactic Academy legend. Jake, relying on his instincts from years of watching action movies and his experience in high school wrestling, ducked under Grogar's grasp in one fluid motion. Using the alien's own momentum against him, Jake grabbed Grogar's arm and flipped the towering creature over his shoulder. Grogar landed with a thunderous crash, his eyes wide with shock. The entire hallway froze. Aliens of all species stared in disbelief. Jake stood over the fallen Grogar, panting but grinning. "Well," Jake said, "I guess you've got to ask yourself one question. Do you feel lucky, punk?" Galactic fame. For a moment, there was silence in the hallway, an eerie, all-consuming quiet that seemed to stretch across galaxies. Grogar lay on the floor, blinking in disbelief as Jake stood over him, hands on his hips, still catching his breath. The other aliens stared in stunned awe. No one had ever dared to challenge Grogar, let alone defeat him so effortlessly. Then suddenly, the silence was shattered by an outburst of excited chatter. Aliens from all around the hall began whispering in their respective languages, their voices rising in pitch and excitement. Jake could pick out a few phrases. "Did you see that? The human took him down. And I can't believe he flipped Grogar," but most of it was unintelligible to him. Grogar slowly got to his feet, still shaking off the shock. His massive fists clenched as he glared at Jake. For a moment, it seemed as if he might charge again, but then something surprising happened. A slow, grudging smile spread across Grogar's face, revealing sharp, tusk-like teeth. "You're tougher than you look, human," Grogar rumbled, his voice low and dangerous. "I like that." Jake raised an eyebrow, cautiously lowering his guard. "Thanks, I think." Without another word, Grogar turned and stumped off, his gang of rhinoceros-like followers trailing behind him. The crowd of students parted as he left, murmuring excitedly. Jake stood there, bewildered, unsure of what had just happened. Had he actually made a friend, or at least avoided making an enemy, out of Grogar? Before Jake could ponder it further, a small group of aliens hurried over to him. They were all talking at once, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of clicks, hums, and screeches. That was amazing. A tall, insectoid alien with iridescent wings buzzed excitedly. "No one ever stands up to Grogar. You're a legend now." A tiny, blob-like creature chimed in, its gelatinous form wobbling with enthusiasm. "The first human to take down a class A bully." Jake smiled sheepishly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I mean, I wasn't really trying to be a hero or anything. Just, instinct." A student with a dozen eyes and tentacles tapped one of his appendages to his chin. "Perhaps humans possess unique combat skills. We must study this further." Jake laughed nervously, hoping no one expected him to make a habit out of flipping alien rhinos. "I don't think flipping Grogar is gonna work every time. Might need to find a less dangerous hobby." Before long, the whispers about Jake's encounter with Grogar spread like wildfire through the academy. By the time he reached his dorm room, half the students on campus had heard about the human who'd flipped the infamous bully. As he opened the door, Jake found his new roommate waiting for him. His roommate was a tall, lanky alien with blue skin and long, flowing antennae. He looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a grasshopper, his body shimmering in the dim light of their dorm. His large, expressive eyes widened as Jake walked in. "You're Jake Thompson, right?" the alien asked, his voice high-pitched and musical. "I'm Zebo. I heard about what happened with Grogar. You're famous already," Jake chuckled and set his backpack down. "Famous? I'd settle for not getting squashed on my first day." Zebo laughed, his antennae twitching. "Don't worry, I've been here for a few galactic cycles. Grogar won't mess with you now. He respects strength, and you showed him you've got plenty." Jake flopped onto his bed, staring up at the glowing ceiling. "Guess I got lucky. I didn't really have a plan, just acted on instinct." Zebo tilted his head curiously. "Humans must have fascinating instincts. Most species here rely on technology or psychic abilities to defend themselves. But you used physical force. It's quite impressive." Jake shrugged. "I guess. Back on Earth, it's just how we handle things sometimes. Though I'm hoping I don't have to use those instincts too often around here." Zebo nodded. Well, you've already made quite the impression. Just be careful. Not everyone will take kindly to a human becoming the center of attention so quickly. There are students here from some pretty, competitive species. Jake sat up, his curiosity piqued. What do you mean? Zebo glanced around nervously before leaning in closer. There are species here that value power above all else. Strength, intelligence, influence, it's all a gain to them. They'll see you as a threat now, especially after what happened with Grogar. Jake frowned. Great. So I've gone from being the new guy to having a target on my back. Zebo smiled reassuringly. Don't worry, Jake. I've got your back. Besides, there are plenty of students who admire what you did. You just need to find your group, your allies. Jake smiled, feeling a little better. Thanks, Zebo. I appreciate that. As the two roommates settled in for the night, Jake couldn't help but reflect on how quickly things had escalated. He had come to the Galactic Academy expecting a wild adventure, but he hadn't anticipated becoming a minor celebrity or potentially making enemies on his very first day. Still, as he lay in bed, staring out at the alien stars twinkling through the window, he felt a sense of excitement bubbling inside him. Sure, things were going to get weird, maybe even dangerous, but that was all part of the adventure. He had wanted a new beginning, a fresh start, and the Galactic Academy was proving to be just that. Jake smiled to himself, his mind racing with thoughts of what tomorrow would bring. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready. After all, he was Jake Thompson, human, earthling, and now, an unlikely legend at the most prestigious school in the galaxy. The next day, combat training. The next morning, Jake woke up to find a notification on his holoscreen. It was an official message from the Academy, informing him that he had been enrolled in an elective course, combat training for non-psychic species. Jake stared at the screen in disbelief. Combat training? I didn't sign up for this. Zebo, who was lounging nearby, glanced over at the notification. Oh, that's the Academy's way of gently encouraging students to hone their skills. Especially after an incident like yours. They probably think you need to refine your abilities after taking down Grogar. Jake groaned. I don't want to be some kind of combat prodigy. I just want to survive the school year. Zebo laughed. Well, you might not have a choice. Besides, combat training isn't just about fighting. It's about discipline, strategy, and understanding the strengths and weaknesses of different species. You'll learn a lot. With a resigned sigh, Jake gathered his things and headed to the combat training arena, which was located in a massive dome on the edge of the Academy grounds. The dome shimmered with a protective force field, and inside, students from all over the galaxy were sparring, practicing techniques, and learning to control their unique abilities. Jake felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach as he entered the arena. He wasn't a fighter, not really. Sure, he had wrestled a bit in high school, and he had watched plenty of action movies, but this was a whole different ball game. A tall, imposing figure stood in the center of the arena, directing the training sessions. She was a fierce-looking alien with metallic skin, sharp, angular features, and glowing red eyes. Her voice boomed through the arena as she addressed the students. Welcome to Combat Training 101. I am Instructor Vrex, and I will be overseeing your progress. In this class, you will learn to defend yourself against any threat, no matter the species or abilities you face. Instructor Vrex's gaze fell on Jake, and she raised an eyebrow. Ah, the human. I've heard about you. Let's see if your reputation is deserved. Jake swallowed nervously as the other students turned to look at him. Clearly, the story of his encounter with Grogar had spread even here. Step into the ring, Thompson, Vrex commanded, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. Let's see what you've got. Jake hesitated for a moment, but knew there was no backing out. He stepped into the center of the arena, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on him. This was it, his first real test at the Galactic Academy. First fight. Jake stood in the center of the ring, trying to keep his nerves under control. Instructor Vrex gestured to a nearby student. a towering alien with blue-scaled skin and 4 arms. "Your opponent is Drex," Vrex announced. "He's from the planet Zorath, known for its warriors. Let's see how you fare." Drex stepped forward, his 4 fists clenched and eyes locked on Jake. He was easily twice Jake's size, with muscles bulging under his scales. "Ready, human," Drex growled. Jake took a deep breath, remembering what Zebo had said about discipline and strategy. He couldn't rely on brute strength alone. "Yeah, let's do this." Vrex raised a hand. "Begin." Drex charged immediately, his fists swinging in a flurry of attacks. Jake barely dodged the first punch, ducking and weaving as best as he could. Drex was fast, far faster than Jake had anticipated. Instinct kicked in. Jake dropped low, sweeping his leg out to trip Drex. The alien stumbled but didn't fall. Instead, he swung one of his lower arms, catching Jake in the ribs. The blow knocked the wind out of him, sending him skidding across the floor. "Focus, human," Vrex barked. "Use your surroundings, not just your body." Jake groaned, pushing himself up. He glanced around the ring, noticing a series of platforms and walls built into the training area. An idea formed in his mind. Drex came at him again, fists flying. This time, Jake didn't try to meet him head-on. Instead, he darted toward one of the platforms, leaping onto it. Drex hesitated for a moment, confused. Taking advantage of the pause, Jake jumped from the platform, landing on Drex's back. Using his smaller size to his advantage, he locked his arms around the alien's neck, pulling him into a chokehold. Drex thrashed, trying to throw Jake off, but the human held on tight. After a few tense moments, Drex's struggles slowed, and finally he tapped out. Instructor Vrex stepped forward, nodding approvingly. "Not bad, Thompson. You used strategy, not just force. But you'll need more than that to survive here." Jake released Drex, panting heavily. The crowd of students watched in stunned silence. Once again, the human had come out on top. Unexpected allies. After the match, Jake sat on the bench, nursing his sore ribs. Zebo rushed over, his antennae twitching with excitement. "You did it again," Zebo exclaimed. "That was incredible." Jake shook his head. "I barely made it. If Drex had been any faster, I'd be toast." "Still, you won." "That's what matters," Zebo said, handing him a water bottle. "And now people are really talking about you." Jake sighed. "Great. Just what I wanted, more attention." Before Jake could say more, a group of students approached. Among them was Drex, rubbing his neck but smiling. "You fight well, human," Drex said, his voice deep but friendly. "I respect that." Jake blinked in surprise. Thanks." Drex nodded. "You've earned a place among us. If you ever need help, you have my support." Jake glanced at Zebo, who grinned and gave him a thumbs up. It seemed like Jake had made his first ally, or maybe even his first few, at the academy. Rising tensions. The days that followed were a whirlwind of training, classes, and more strange encounters with aliens from all corners of the galaxy. Jake's reputation continued to grow, and with it, so did the pressure. Everywhere he went, students whispered about the human warrior. But not all the attention was positive. One afternoon, Jake was walking back to his dorm when a group of students blocked his path. They were all from a species Jake didn't recognize. Tall, thin aliens with glowing green eyes and silver skin. The leader, a sneering alien with a scar across his face, stepped forward. "You think you're special, human?" the alien asked, his voice dripping with contempt. "Just because you flipped Grogar and beat Drex." Jake tensed. "I'm not looking for trouble." "Too late," the alien hissed. "You've already made enemies, and we don't take kindly to humans getting too much attention around here." Jake's heart raced. He glanced around, but there was no one else nearby, just him and these hostile aliens. Before the situation could escalate, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Back off, Scar." Jake turned to see Grogar approaching, flanked by a few of his cronies. Scar scowled but stepped back. "This isn't over, human," Scar spat before stalking away with his group. Jake let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He glanced at Groga, confused. "Why'd you help me?" Groga grunted. "You earned my respect, Thompson. I don't like Scar. If he messes with you, he messes with me." Jake nodded slowly. "Thanks." Groga didn't respond, just turned and walked away. As Jake watched him go, he realized something important. He wasn't just surviving at the Galactic Academy. He was starting to make powerful allies. But with those alliances came even greater challenges. A new challenge. A week later, Jake received another message on his holoscreen. This one was from the headmaster of the academy, a stern-looking alien with multiple eyes and a towering presence. "Jake Thompson, report to the headmaster's office immediately." Jake's stomach dropped. What could this be about? He had done his best to stay out of trouble, but the constant attention was making that difficult. When he arrived at the office, the headmaster's gaze bore into him. "Mr. Thompson, it seems your reputation has spread beyond this academy. There are other academies interested in challenging you." Jake blinked in confusion. "Challenging me?" The headmaster nodded. "Yes, you've been invited to compete in the Intergalactic Combat Tournament. It's an honor, reserved for only the most skilled students across the galaxy." Jake's jaw dropped. A combat tournament, against the best fighters from other academies. He wasn't sure if he should be excited or terrified. "Do you accept?" the headmaster asked, his many eyes watching Jake closely. Jake swallowed hard. This was it, the biggest challenge yet. But something inside him stirred, a feeling of determination. "I accept," Jake said, his voice steady. "I'll do it." The headmaster nodded. "Very well. Prepare yourself, Mr. Thompson. The tournament begins in 2 weeks. And remember, failure is not an option." As Jake left the office, his heart raced with a mix of fear and anticipation. The stakes had just been raised, and there was no turning back now. The final battle. 2 weeks flew by, and the day of the Intergalactic Combat Tournament arrived. The arena buzzed with energy, filled with spectators from every corner of the galaxy. Jake stood backstage, his nerves on edge as he watched the other competitors, a fearsome collection of aliens, each more intimidating than the last. Beside him stood Grogar and Zebo, offering last-minute words of encouragement. "You've got this, Jake," Zebo said, his antennae twitching excitedly. "Just do what you always do, surprise them." Grogar grunted. "Remember, you're not just fighting for yourself. You're representing the academy. Don't let us down." Jake nodded, taking a deep breath. He had trained hard for this moment, pushing his body and mind to their limits. Now, it was time to prove what he was made of. As he stepped into the arena, the crowd roared. His first opponent was a massive creature with 6 arms and razor-sharp claws, a champion from a rival academy. The creature snarled, clearly underestimating the human. The announcer's voice boomed across the arena. "First match. Jake Thompson of Galactic Academy versus Carrick of Dorath." The match began, and Carrick charged with a fury Jake hadn't faced before, but Jake was ready. Using his agility and quick thinking, he dodged the brutal attacks, striking back with precision. Carrick was strong, but Jake was clever, exploiting his opponent's weaknesses. In a stunning move, Jake flipped Carrick using his own momentum, pinning the creature to the ground. The crowd erupted in cheers as the announcer declared Jake the winner. One by one, Jake faced opponents from different planets, each more challenging than the last. But with every victory, his confidence grew. He was no longer just a human from Earth. He was a force to be reckoned with. Finally, it was time for the final match. Jake's opponent was a mysterious fighter clad in black armor, their face obscured by a mask. The arena fell silent as the two competitors faced each other. The battle was fierce, with both fighters pushing themselves to their limits. The masked opponent was fast and skilled, matching Jake move for move. But in the end, it was Jake's adaptability and quick thinking that won the day. With a final powerful strike, he knocked the masked fighter to the ground. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause as Jake stood victorious, panting but triumphant. He had done it. He had won the intergalactic combat tournament. As he left the arena, his friends by his side, Jake couldn't help but smile. He had come to the Galactic Academy as an outsider, but now he was a champion. And though the challenges ahead would be many, he knew one thing for sure: he was ready for whatever the galaxy had to throw at him.